My name is Danny, and I have worked night shift at gas stations for a little over 14 years. Most people have a very different idea of what this job looks. They picture something out of a movie, a robbery every other week, a guy in a ski mask waving a gun around, cops showing up with lights going. That stuff happens, but not as nearly as often as people think. Most of the job is a lot more boring than you think. You restock the cooler, you mop the same floor twice, you count the drawer, you watch the same 12 cars pulling for gas in midnight, and half of them don't even come inside. But the truth is, working overnight at a gas station is mostly just sitting behind the counter in a building made of glass in the middle of the night and being the only lit up thing for a mile in any direction. And after a while, you stop noticing it, it becomes normal. You get used to being the only person awake now. I have worked a lot of different stations over the years, truck stops off the interstate, little two-pump places in town you have never heard of, corner stores in a parts of city where the register has a steel cage around it. Most nights, nothing happens. Somebody buys a cigarette, somebody asks for bathroom key, somebody counts out gas money in nickels, and that's the job. That's 99% of it. But every once in a while, something happens on a night shift that really doesn't fit. Something that makes you sit very still behind that counter and not want to look up at the windows. Something you end up thinking about years later on other shifts at other stations when it gets quiet. I want to be clear about something before I start. I am not claiming I know what happened in any of these. I don't. In every one of these stories, there are details that could probably be explained if somebody had enough information. The problem is that I never got enough information. Most of the nights end with an ordinary explanation, but these don't. The first one happened during my third year on nights. It started the way 100 boring shift starts. One regular customer, a man who came in at the same time every night. Nothing about him seemed strange at first, and then one night I looked at the security monitor and I realized I had been wrong about him for the entire time. The first story happened in the winter of 2013. At the time I was working a station of a state highway, the kind of a place where two islands of bumps out front and nothing around it but dark fields and a road that didn't get much traffic after 11. The nearest town was about 12 minutes away. On a slow night I might see 6 cars total between midnight and my relief showing up at 6 in the morning. There was a man who came in every night around 2 a.m. I want to say I first noticed him maybe 2 weeks into working that particular station. He was older, grey, wore the same tank coat every night no matter the weather. He would come in, walk straight to the coffee machine at the back, pour a cup, bring it to the counter, pay with the exact change and leave. He never said more than a few words. Cold night tonight? Quiet, huh? And that kind of things. I liked him honestly. When you work nights, the regulars become a kind of a clock. You know it's 2 in the morning because the coffee guy just walked in. He was polite, he was quiet, he tipped $1 in the jar even though I never did anything but ring up a coffee. For a couple of months, he was just a part of the shift. Then one night in December he came in, same as always, and while he was back at the coffee machine, another customer pulled up to bumps outside, a younger guy, filling up his truck, and when the younger guy came inside to pay, he walked right past the coffee machine, right past the old man standing there pouring his cup, and he didn't react at all, didn't nod, didn't do the little half step people do when they almost bump into somebody in a narrow aisle. Nothing. He just walked past like the space was empty. Now, at the time, I didn't think much of it. People ignore each other. It's the middle of the night. Nobody feeling chatty. The younger guy paid for high gas and left. The old man brought his coffee, paid his exact change, said cold night tonight and left too. But this stuck with me for a few reasons. And a few nights later, I did something I'd never bothered to do before. When the old man came in at 2 a.m., I looked at the security monitor behind the counter instead of looking at him directly, and he wasn't on it. I want to be careful here, because I know how that sounds. The camera covered the back of the store, the coffee machine, the cooler, the whole rear aisle. I was looking right at the old man with my own eyes. He was standing at the coffee machine pouring a cup, maybe 15 feet away, and on the monitor that part of the store was empty. Only the coffee machine, the counter it sat on, the floor in front of it, all of it was empty. No man, no coat, nothing. I looked up from the monitor. He was still there, real as anything, stirring his coffee. I looked back down at the monitor. It was empty. He walked up to the counter. On the monitor, I was the front of the store, where the register camera also had an angle. I did not see him approach. He was just suddenly at my counter, setting his coffee down, exact change in his hand. "Cold one tonight," he said. I rang him up. My hands were not steady. He took his coffee, dropped his dollar in the jar and walked out, and I watched the door camera as he left. The door opened and the little bell rang, but on the monitor nothing walked right through it. Just the door opening and closing on its own in the middle of the night. I didn't sleep much after that shift. I asked the day manager about it carefully, without telling him what I'd actually seen. I just asked how long that station had been there, whether anything had ever happened. He told me the place had been a gas station since the 70s, and that the previous owner, an older man, had run it for himself for almost 30 years, worked the counter most nights personally, and died of a heart attack in the back of the store. In one winter, they found him in the morning by the coffee machine. I want to give you the ordinary explanation here, because there are probably one. Maybe the camera had a dead zone, I never noticed. Maybe the monitor was glitching, dropping frames, and I never happened to look at the exactly wrong moment. Maybe I tagged myself into the whole thing after one weird coincidence with a younger customer. That's what I told myself, and kept telling myself that right up until my last shift at the station, when the old man came in at 2 a.m., poured his coffee, brought it up to the counter, and for the first time in 3 months, he looked me right in the eye, and then he said, "You are leaving." Not a question. I hadn't told anyone I was transferring. I hadn't told anyone at all. And then he followed, "Take care of the place," and left. I checked the monitor, and it was empty the whole time. The second story happened years later, at a different station in a different state. This one was in the city, a corner store attached to the pumps, open 24 hours, in a neighborhood that got rough after dark. Steel cage around the register, bulletproof glass, the whole setup. You buzzed people in through a second door after midnight, that kind of place. This one I have a harder time explaining away than the coffee man, and I have tried. It was the summer, sometimes around 3 in the morning. It was dead quiet. I was behind the glass doing paperwork when a woman came up to the outer door and I buzzed her in. Ordinary looking, maybe 40s, wearing a hospital type outfit, scrubs, that kind you would see on a nurse or an aide coming from a late night shift. She looked tired. Everybody looks tired at 3 in the morning. Nothing about her set off my alarm. She walked the aisles for a minute, picked up a bottle of water, brought it to the counter, and while I was ringing her up, she said, without really looking at me, "You should call your sister." I stopped. I have a sister, but we weren't on great terms at the time and hadn't talked in a few months, some family stuff, but there is no way this woman could have known I had a sister, let alone anything about us not speaking. "Excuse me," I said, and she looked up at me and she said, "She's going to be okay, but you should call her." And she smiled, this sad kind of a smile, paid for her water, and asked me to buzz her out. I did. She walked out to the parking lot, and I watched her go on the monitor. She walked out past the bumps toward the street and out of frame. I sat there for a long minute, and then, I don't fully know why, I called my sister. 3 in the morning, no warning, first time in months. She picked up on the second ring, and she was crying. She'd been in a car accident earlier that night, rear-ended on the highway. Her car totaled, but she was fine, banged up, shaken but fine. She'd been sitting up, unable to sleep, and she said later that she would been thinking about calling me all night and couldn't work up the nerve. Now, here's why I tried to give you the ordinary explanation, and here's why it started. Maybe the woman was just some kind of stranger who said some vague, "Call your sister." That happened to land. People say things like, "Call your family," all the time. Maybe I had a sister. Sure, most of people do, except me, the narrator, though. And the accident was a coincidence. and my rattled brain stitched it into something bigger than it was. I could almost believe that, except for two things. The first thing is that when I pulled the security footage next day, because I wanted to see her face again, I wanted to convince myself that she was just a normal tired woman, but she wasn't clear on it. Everyone else who came through that night was crisp, recognizable, but her, you couldn't make it out. The footage around her was smeared, out of focus, like the camera couldn't hold her. You could see a shape at the counter, you could see me talking to it, but you couldn't see her. The second thing is the water. She'd bought a bottle of water and taken it with her when she left. I watched her carry it out. But when I closed out the drawer at the end of my shift, it was over by exactly the amount of that bottle of water. She'd paid, the money was there, but there was no bottle missing from inventory. The count was perfect. Nothing had left the store. I worked at the station another year and I never saw her again. I still don't know who she was. What do I know is that she knew about my sister, and she knew about the accident before I did, and I never come up with explanation for that I actually believe.